Hello and welcome to DBATools Office Hours. We are going to talk about SQL PowerShell today. And hopefully that you're in the right spot. Hopefully you will have many questions or maybe even just listen to things we talk about. Right now, I don't see any questions in PolGab. Still trying to get that take off the ground, but that's okay. We'll still talk about some things. There really isn't a whole lot of questions that I have been asked lately, so that's not a thing. But what I thought I'd do is open the canvas here and just talk about SQL PowerShell and what SQL PowerShell is, because we're going to begin next week with topics that just center around SQL PowerShell and what it is. Windows PowerShell has been around there for a long time. There's been many books written on SQL PowerShell, on PowerShell itself, but the one thing we do have is if you want SQL PowerShell, there is plenty of things about SQL PowerShell. The docs pages here will talk about different ways to install the SQL Server module. The biggest piece here is I wanted to go to Amazon.com and give you a shout out for DBATools. There is a new book that has, not new necessarily, it's been out for a while, but we have Learn DBATools in a Month of Lunches. And that is all about SQL PowerShell. So SQL Server and PowerShell together. Windows PowerShell is awesome, but you're welcome to chat in the chat and let me know if there's any questions or any things that you have to bring up while we're here for the viewers that are on. This is recorded, so it will be in the videos here on Twitch so that you can get there. But if you just typed in SQL, there's a lot of SQL. So there's a SQL Server module, obviously by Microsoft. Lots of downloads, 50 million. That's pretty good. There is az.sql, which has more downloads than SQL Server, but this is more of the Azure flavor of SQL, so you get some PowerShell to do things with Azure. There's a SQL virtual machine. There's AZ PostgreSQL, interesting. SQL Server DSC. DSC is just a wow. I can't remember what DSC stands for. That's just sad. It's right on the tip of my tongue, but that's okay. AZ MySQL, Simply SQL. So there's quite a few SQL things. DBATools, PS SQLite, SQL Helper. So plenty of things about SQL, DBA checks. So there's plenty of SQL out there to run for PowerShell. The key to this whole piece of SQL PowerShell, really, to manipulate a SQL engine, has been out since SQL 2005, really. So that is SMO. So if you look at SMO download, they have now open sourced SMO, which is, if I did GitHub and SMO, you'll see that SQL management objects from Microsoft, so it's a Microsoft repository, SQL management objects here, is right here. So you can actually, here's the source. Now it takes a little bit to build, but you can certainly do that. But the biggest piece here is that you can go into each piece and look at SMO. And SMO has a lot of things in it. Availability database, blah, 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 blah. So you can do, let's look at database, right? Database.cs. So here's actual code in the license under the MIT license. And you can actually take this and submit pull requests for this. They have a dev team that will take that in, and you can see how long it started ago. So M underscore, that was a very common thing back in the day when I was developing in C. There was many times when C++ came around, we had classes. I learned to program when there wasn't classes. There were structs, but there weren't classes. And M underscore is a very common thing for member variables. So just seeing that brings back fond memories to let me know that there's some weird things in there. But there's lots of things in here, and sometimes here's the reason why this is kind of cool. Now there's a lot of code, so if we went down to the very bottom of this code, there's a lot of lines, right? So there's a good 7,000 lines of code in this guy. But the reason why I like this SMO thing, number one, it used to be that we would download it, download SSMS or Management Studio. We would install SSMS and it would put the SMO stuff in the place called the GAC. So if I said Windows Assembly, the GAC MSIL, which is basically a principle of I guess I'm going to have to get off the broadcast. I guess I have been called into a meeting. So we will have to reconvene this later and come back to it.